Okay. Great. Well, we are live. Great. I didn't even see the countdown. That went so quickly. Well, hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining. I'm Allison Branger. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at Launch Metrics. I have a very exciting guest here today who is joining me from IMG to talk a little bit about the power of partners, not just during Fashion Week, but worldwide, all events, and everything happening in our industry. So Patrick, thank you so much for joining me today. Maybe you could introduce yourself and tell the audience a little bit about you and what you do at IMG.
Of course. Thanks for having me, Allison. My name is Patrick Connors. I'm the SVP of Global Brand Partnerships here at IMG Fashion Events team. What we do on our team is handle all fashion events globally that IMG owns and operates. New York Fashion Week and Australian Fashion Week are two of our largest platforms. Then we have strategic partnerships with other global fashion weeks throughout the year, as well as building any beauty and fashion partnerships, what we call off-season, outside of New York Fashion Week as well. My team specifically, what we do is the sales and marketing team, where we work with brand partners on how they integrate either into our own operated properties or how they connect with the fashion consumer at large throughout the globe.
Great. Well, no secret between you and I, but as I used to work at IMG, I'm curious to know, what is your favorite Fashion Week and why?
Oh gosh, Allison, you're putting me in the spot. You know what? Fashion weeks are so different. I mean, one thing I love, New York Fashion Week is the largest fashion week in around the globe. There are many, obviously, other fashion weeks that happen globally, but New York Fashion Week is the one that really drives the most business, not only for us as a team at IMG, but really globally from an industry perspective as well. I mean, just in the week alone that New York Fashion Week is hosted in February and September every year, and just in one of those weeks alone, we drive about $900 million worth of business for New York City. It is the #1 largest the Visa, the US Open, hosting the Super Bowl in New York, whatever the case is, because it's really a huge industry event that drives so many dollars for the city alone. So it's really exciting in that way. However, I just came back from Australian Fashion Week in Sydney, which happens in May every year. And the Sydney backdrop and, the Australian designers there too really are exciting as well. So I'm really excited now that coming out of COVID, I get to go to more fashion weeks, outside of our own here in New York City. So I'm looking forward to a busy season ahead.
Oh, good. Yeah, I feel like it's so hard to pick one fashion week that's the best. Like, everyone has a separate thing. When we used to swim in Miami, I loved that. Actually, my job during the day was just hanging out and going to the pool, and the event was at night. Or like Mumbai, it was just like a hilarious event because it was so beautiful. The dresses and gowns and local kind of attire was so beautiful and well crafted, but the event was just so relaxed, which everything in India is. It's not like, in Berlin, where if things were a minute late, it was crazy. Like, things in Mumbai would be 3 hours late and everyone's like, it's fine, darling, have another drink. So it really gave everyone
has their own personality.
I was just gonna say the same thing. Yeah. So lucky
yes,
you.
It's like having a bunch of kids and you're trying to wrangle them all together, but they all have different personalities. So
exactly. It's like you have to put on a different hat when you get to each location.
Mm-hmm. A different pair of stilettos is more like it.
I like it. Except when you're in Toronto, and that also is a shock for me too. Like, people showing up in like snow boots and like Canada Goose puffer jackets, but it was literally that cold. So yeah, I'm really excited, as I told you kind of backstage, to talk about the power of partners. I think the concept of partners or sponsors, or however you guys as audience members tuning in think about that terminology, I think it's really evolved from the days of when Fashion Week first had sponsors, and to today, how events in general worldwide are leveraging the support of key partners to amplify their message. So I do think this is a great topic. You know, I guess the kind of big question people always have, though, is that, well, maybe I can introduce this with some interesting data, which sparked our conversation. You know, we've been working with IMG for a few years, on and off. Like, we're always running data, whether it's for IMG or other clients, definitely mostly for press as well, about what's happening at Fashion Week. And one data point that came up last Fashion Week that just was so interesting, that really sparked this conversation between Patrick and I, was that the sponsors or the partners themselves were generating more than 60% of the designers showing at New York Fashion Week. And that's a really big number, because, I mean, as Patrick actually articulated in his kind of in my hot seat question to kick it off, but New York Fashion Week is one of the largest fashion weeks in the world. So if you imagine, even the smaller designers participating in New York Fashion Week are still quite large when you compare them to a market like London, let's say. So the fact that some of these partners are generating more than 60% of the designers is really kind of amazing and astonishing, especially in this landscape where people question, like, why do people sponsor events? Why do people want to partner with you guys at IMG for things like New York Fashion Week? So maybe that's a good, way to kick off this conversation. From your perspective and your expertise, why are brands sponsoring these events, and what is the ROI for them?
Yeah, for us, in thinking about our partners, is we look at Fashion Week as a lens of culture. Culture within fashion can be streetwear culture to couture, and how consumers engage with fashion. We all think about what we're wearing, every single morning, no matter if you're doing it consciously because you have to think of a big event or not. When you walk out the door, you're expressing yourself through what you're wearing, and how that's, how people are perceiving you. And when consumers, obviously, then you have a uber fashion consumer, which we speak to probably more regularly during New York Fashion Week, and our designers, because they're designers and not brands that maybe are available everywhere, is we speak to a real consumer who wants to be on the cusp of all things happening in fashion. But that play into culture is what our sponsors are most interested in. It is through a lens. We have done many partnerships through lenses of designer partnerships, in which we are deep with a particular designer during the week, or more general partnerships with New York Fashion Week in general, just to reach a broader fashion consumer. And when we think of sponsorships, we don't think of them as a slap of a logo. That is a formula that all events used to think of back, years ago. What we think of it as, it is, what are your goals and objectives that you want to achieve in connecting to through this cultural moment to a consumer, and change either your perception in the marketplace, launch something new to the marketplace, have a conversation with a new consumer that hasn't thought of you. As any CMO is talking now, it's all about a cultural game of how relevant you are in culture. And that will propel your brand or not, depending upon how you play in that culture. You can't just buy your way into culture. You really have to have it through a lens of people who understand that pillar of culture that we're talking about, in particular for us, obviously through fashion.
I think that's such a good point. This kind of, you can't buy your way in, like, you have to really make sure what you're doing feels authentic to the audience that you're trying to reach, the brand perception you're trying to exude, as well as hope that the customer looks at when they think of your brand. So I think that was something really interesting that I know you and I have talked about previously, just how I know I mentioned that the customer today is demanding that brands really align with their interests and needs, and really, finding the right partnership for the right event, for the right brands is so key. And I do think that is why we saw such high numbers, because these brands came in, as you said, they didn't slap a logo on. They really thought of something quite authentic and relevant. And I guess this brings me to like a interesting kind of comment or question is, you know, Afterpay has become a really big sponsor in the space. And I think some people would wonder why a fintech brand would want to be involved. But I think there's a lot of value in connecting what you guys are doing. The audience, that's not just a B2B audience now, it's a B2C audience following a B2B event. You know, talk to me a little bit about that relationship and, you know, what brands in the fintech space are seeing from their sponsorships or partnerships.
Yeah, absolutely. Is that New York Fashion Week has definitely evolved. I mean, New York Fashion Week, the original concept of New York Fashion Week was for the industry. So when we think about how it was constructed before, it was so that editors and those that are buyers in the marketplace are sitting front row to see a show that is showing product that would be available in 6 months from now, so that they could write about it and the buyers could buy it then and have it, the designers could then produce it. With the onset of social happening in all of our lives, that everyone's kind of peeking into different access points, is it instantly changed what New York Fashion Week meant. So now New York Fashion Week is, I would say, if you just wanted to split it in half, is that we cater to 50% still the industry and 50% now consumer. And that consumer is engaging with us, some on site, some online, some on social. And it's not just us as a brand, it's how designers have to think about how they're engaging with consumers during all of that time frame, as well as their buyers. When we think about because of this evolution of consumer, when we think about Afterpay coming on as a partner, as they did last September was their first year, we're thrilled to have them as a presenting sponsor. Afterpay completes the cycle for transaction. So in the past, New York Fashion Week would show a collection. You would see a beautiful collection, of course. And then the consumer started seeing it on social, like I said, but the consumer couldn't take action to actually purchase that item and complete the cycle. And that, therefore, was not only a letdown to the consumer, but it was also a letdown to a designer that had just showcased this and wasn't able to complete the transaction immediately. Some of that has to do with production schedules and so on and so forth. But Afterpay coming on as our presenting sponsor in both Australia and in New York has really allowed the circle to be complete. This has been a great benefit to the consumer audience. It's been a great benefit to designers as well, because designers can now include pieces in their collection that are see now, buy now, which doesn't mean the entire collection has to be see now, buy now, but there can be some elements that consumers can purchase directly and at a higher price point than the consumer is used to paying at. But because of Afterpay and paying in 4 payments over the next few months, they're able to increase their base of consumers who are now able to afford some of the items in the collection.
It makes me think of some research. I know you guys have a great relationship with Moda Operandi, and we've done some research, the 3 of us together, but just the sheer volume that Fashion Week drives from a business sales perspective for these brands is quite interesting. I mean, again, as you said, when Fashion Week started, it was a B2B event, but now we have all of these consumers like tuning in to watch, whether it's on social media or live streaming or just following up through still imagery that they see online. And the fact is, you're right, they do want it now. Like some things they appreciate, like you have to wait for, etc. But to even get a touch or a glimpse of what's just come down the runway is really exciting. And to see, I think it was some stat, and nobody quote me because I can't remember if this is exactly it, but feel free to follow up with the PRs for Patrick and I. But it was something like, you know, half of the brands that generate the top 10 buzz during New York Fashion Week also generate like the top 10 sales. So it really kind of proves that this is what consumers are looking for. And when you're catering 50% to the consumer, 50% to B2B, it's quite an important kind of aspect of your show today. Absolutely. You know, along the lines of this changing consumer that we started to, our changing values and the consumer demand. How do you think that the changing values of the consumer has impacted a brand's fight to remain kind of relevant today?
I think that, as brands, again, going back to my point of culture, brands are trying to tap into culture, and this is an opportunity for them to remain relevant. We worked with both competitors, 2 different seasons, but I'll give an example. We all know the soda wars of, we have Coca-Cola and Pepsi. We've worked with both of those in various ways to bring to life an execution in which we all know those brands. Those brands are relevant in our daily conversation. Do you want a Pepsi? Do you want a Coke? Those are things part of our vocabulary. But those brands also have to keep themselves always as part of culture. And whenever we did a collaboration, for example, with the Pepsi collaboration we did with Dapper Dan, this last September, we did a collaboration in which we launched a capsule collection with Pepsi, Dapper Dan, and the NFL, because Fashion Week hit the same week of the launch of the NFL season. And it was an awesome product drop. We did a content shoot, and Dap created them in his atelier up in Harlem. And Victor Cruz hosted the content shoot that we did, and it dropped during Fashion Week. It sold out in 4 minutes. Those type of moments allow Pepsi to engage in culture that was still connected. We all know they were a big partner of the NFL as a big, sports, but this allowed them to tap into culture in fashion, which isn't necessarily their core audience in their core platforms, but allows them to reach out to a new audience and have that. And obviously the demand of the product, and associating with Dapper Dan, who's also part of the Endeavor family, allowed us to make sure that they're keeping their relevance and talking to a different type of audience and expanding their core audience reach.
Wow, that sounds so cool. I'm gonna have to look that up now. I do miss Fashion Week, like Super Bowl and Fashion Week together. I remember we used to, in Bryant Park, like break out the big screen in like the biggest showroom space and turn it on. And it was always really kind of exciting. You were exhausted from a full day of shows, but then you wanted to see the halftime show on the big screen. So do you miss that?
Yes. I think that it's a great example of like the combination, usually people are like, sports is over here and fashion is over here. And what we have seen, everyone knows now, as NBA players, NFL players, any of these athletes walk into their stadiums and walk out of it, it is questions, pictures of what are they wearing.
Yeah.
Fashion has become such a part of their off the court or off the field sensibility of who they are, their self-expression, sitting front row at Fashion Week. All of this is, again, playing into culture and playing into your sense of who you are as a person is expressed on how you look, how you put yourself together. So that we all have always seen it on stages, at concerts, and so on and so forth, is the way someone dresses and performs, says about them. But we're seeing it even more and more in sports. So that combination really has allowed us to expand partnerships and expand conversations that aren't, maybe areas that people would say, well, you need to stay away from the sports angle. You're fashion. There's a combination of the two of them happening in the world, and we're happy to bring those to life.
I think that brings me to another question that I'm just looking to. Travis Hamilton, who's in the audience, asked a question, and I feel like, Travis, you and I have similar questions that I want to ask Patrick. Talking about this pairing that you just spoke about, Patrick, how do you guys at IMG create these pairings for brands and designers? Like, what's interesting that you look at? How do you think of these alignments? It would be great to, I think he's asking, probably interested in being one of the sponsors. I'm asking because I'm just curious based on what you said, but let's see if you can give us both an answer.
Yeah. So how we engage is, it could start from 2 different ways. One, we have a designer relations team here within the IMG fashion team. They are constantly talking to designers daily, and those that are names, recognized names that we know, those that are emerging designers as well. And as they talk to them about how their shows are going to come together, look at their collections, understanding where they are in their growth cycle, what we as IMG Fashion can bring to the table for them to help them get to their next level of their careers and so on and so forth. Some of them bring some great ideas that are like, I would love to work with this brand. And this is wow, I could see it come to life. Now, sometimes people want to work with a brand that a brand isn't interested in fashion. They're not interested in this designer. They have different goals and objectives. They've spent their money for the year. We all have known this, right? It's like you kind of have to be, or quite frankly, I might not know anyone at the brand and are reaching out cold, right? But that is one way that gives us great opportunity to say to a brand partner, we have something for you and a designer who would love to work with you and how this could come together. That's one way. On the other way is more likely to happen is I'm constantly having conversations with heads, SVPs of marketing, CMOs of various brands, and understanding their direction in culture and how they want to tap into culture, what they're launching, what they're getting behind, so on and so forth. And these are usually a year out conversations, right? Is really understanding where they want their brand to be in that 2 to 3 years from now. Some happen much sooner, but this allows us then, what I do is I talk to the brands, get the information from them, go back to my designer relations team and really have a conversation of what the brand's goals and objectives are. Is it that they want to tap into emerging designers? Okay, let's talk about that. Why do they want to do that? Do they want to support emerging designers in the sense of not only financially, but maybe their product has offerings that could help elevate someone's career? Do they want to jump into the diversity bucket and really support small, growing, diverse businesses or diverse designers of any scale? Do they more want the name? Maybe they need the association with a name recognition of a designer that you, Allison, myself, the guests here tuning in might know the designer's name, and therefore that's helping elevate the brand in association with the designer. So understanding those goals and objectives is then we think about, okay, what are the designer needs? And we don't always just think about designers. We also just think about talent in general, because sometimes it is not necessarily with a designer. It's just their association with New York Fashion Week, and then bringing in influencers, talent, content creators, whatever the case is, to then amplify that message that we'd be creating together.
Great. Well, I hope, Travis, that answered your question. It definitely was the answer I was not looking for, but looking for.
I'm glad I delivered.
Exactly. I guess we can't talk about Fashion Week without talking about, this either digital, phygital world that has come around and the uprise of the phygital fashion show experience, or even the metaverse. How do you think that's trickled down to New York Fashion Week? What are your thoughts on it? What do you see as the future? Any of the above?
Yeah. So we just like everyone else are very excited about what the future holds. We understand too, as a brand and as any platform, you need to continue to evolve, and you need to continue to evolve of where and test, quite honestly, right? Is that everyone is testing in the Web3 Metaverse space, which we should. Will that be the absolute end all be all? I don't think so. I think it will be a combination. Like you said, the digital world will exist. Is that as we came back from COVID and been having, our more and more people on site for New York Fashion Week, it is more exciting than it has ever. People are so excited, and I'm sure everyone on here too. You're so excited to get out to see people. If it's meeting a friend at a bar, to going to a concert, to going to New York Fashion Week, that being in touch with people and being in a physical place together is really, really driving consumers right now in things that they do. It doesn't mean that we're all not connected digitally at the same time. So as we are approaching the Web3 and Metaverse space, is we do so, some designers are well into that space right away. Other designers are not quite there yet and asking for IMG Fashion to help guide them in that space because they don't want to enter the space foolishly. They want to enter it in the right way. They also want to enter it with the right partners. So it's our responsibility, and my team, particularly on the brand partnership side, is when we bring on these larger brand partners and those that might play in crypto, NFT, Web3 space, is bringing them on and vetting them. So not only as sponsors and supporters of the event, but also introducing designers to them in order to be educated and use possibly their platforms then as a resource to help these designers go live in any kind of innovation. You know, Yahoo is our innovation partner, and they have done major things with us the past few seasons with designers in bringing their shows to life, be it in AR experiences, and really, again, a combination of the digital and physical world.
I think it's a big question that we keep getting with our clients too. I think everyone, it's like when Snapchat launched filters to try on sneakers, right? Everyone was like, oh, well, I never need to go into a store to try on sneakers. Like, of course you'll need to go into a store and try on sneakers at some point because your feet are going to change sizes and you'll need to know what size you are. Or maybe you'll just have to order a bunch online and then keep trying them. But physically, you're going to need to put them on your feet before you buy them. Or before you decide to keep them. I think that the metaverse is really, really exciting. But I think right now, like you said, people are so excited to get back to physical. That my opinion, personally, two things. One is that it's the moment of physical again. Of course, you need some digital element because not everyone is traveling. China's not traveling. People are still hesitant to travel for work or less. They're excited, but maybe businesses are thinking they don't need to invest as much in work travel. I did see a funny meme before this, though, that was like, it was a video of the Lisbon airport, and it was like, look at all this revenge travel. And it was just like long lines of people trying to check in because everyone is desperate to like do something exciting, get away. So I think the physical event is back. I think people are excited about the metaverse, but I think the other challenge too is that, as you know, brands are so precious about like their brand image and how their brand is presented. So some of the feedback we're getting from our clients is that we're excited about the metaverse. It's not ready for us to present our brand in the way we really want to present it. So until then, they'll continue with the more, I would hate to say traditional, but a phygital experience for how they present their brand and collections. And
absolutely. And I think that you know this, Allison, but I think that a lot of people don't understand how small businesses these designer brands are. Is there are not a lot of people working on these brands, and they lean a lot on IMG, thankfully, to help, you know, with brand partnerships or anything that we can help with, of course, production, so on and so forth. But I think that, you know, there isn't like, oh, great, they have a whole digital team who can like focus on the metaverse and build something. Especially the brands that we're speaking to and that showcase at Fashion Weeks globally, they're not corporations. They're not, you know, of course, we all know the LVMHs and the different brands that are, you know, the parent companies that own big brands are in a different position. But these are small businesses that are hoping one day to that position where they're worth millions of dollars, of course. But they're in growth mode. And growth mode doesn't always allow you to test and try every single thing that comes to your doorstep, even though you might want to. You know, you have to think of your bottom line too and how you're growing your brand, but not becoming, but still evolving of relevant times and not becoming extinct and staying in the past. And we too at New York Fashion Week think the same way, is that we have to continue to play in different arenas, but we also know that New York Fashion Week physically has come back stronger than it ever has to. And it doesn't mean that we're not paying attention to and not engaging in Web3 and digital too. If anything, it's just expanding our audience more and more.
Absolutely. We have 1 minute, and I think there's one good question. What would you recommend to a brand who'd like to investigate a brand partnership, and what is a good timeline to start? So if they're interested in talking to you guys to potentially start partnership chats.
Give me a ring. Give me a ring right away. Reach out. And it all depends on when the partnership is. So meaning when we want to execute, what level of partnership it is. Meaning if we're going to create something like we did with Dapper Dan and Pepsi, to actually create the line takes time for a designer to think of the design. Yes, you are working with a corporation. Sponsors are corporations. So there is a approval process that we all know exists in the corporate world, that even though we all try to push to make it faster, sometimes it doesn't happen. There's also production. And the challenges with not only this type of production, but also designers' production is the supply chains have been difficult for everyone across the whole community for the past year plus. And so depending upon if you want a physical item or do you want to do an activation on site at Spring Studios, our headquarters every year, that can come to life a little quicker. So we're well engaged with people for September. We're still open for business, obviously, in talking to people about September, but we're already even having conversations for 2023 as well. So we're kind of in the sweet spot time of year where you're still talking to things in 2022 and also talking 2023.
Great. Well, if you haven't started planning, I guess that means you should start planning. To Andrea, who asked this, or Andrea, I'm not sure what part of the world you are in and how I should pronounce your name, but I'll leave you guys with those thoughts. Patrick, thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you guys all found this interesting and you learned a little bit. Andrea said she did say, thanks so much for your insights today. I love listening, and thank you. So I'll close with her words, and you guys have a great day and see you soon.
Thank you, Allison, so much. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Bye.